Hello, I want to welcome each of you this day to Companions on a Journey, Come Sit at Our Table. This day's topic is the journey of a bereaved parent, and with me are incredible parents who have had incredible love of their children, and they carry them with them each day. So I want to thank you for being my guest, and how about if we start with each of you just sharing your name, your child's name, and a bit of your journey, and maybe we could begin with you, Pat.
Sure. My name is Pat Buckley, and my son Dan was killed in a random act of violence 25 years ago. He was the oldest of our 8 children. At the time, we had 2 other children in 2 different colleges, 2 sons in high school, and 3 children in grade school. So our journey was very, I would say, not harder than someone else's, but very challenging from the beginning. Dan had completed, he had just graduated from Washington University. He was in officer candidate school, and it was a tragic incident that caused his death. Following that, there were 2 years of legal positioning with the perpetrators, so we also had to manage with the legal aspect of it at the same time. In those years, my husband Bruce and I both relied on each other at some greater extent, but we also recognized that our journey was going to be unique.
Thank you, Pat.
My name is Mark Murphy, and my daughter Elizabeth Murphy passed away in June 2020, and she passed away of an accidental overdose. It was a fentanyl mixed with Xanax or something. We live in Westchester, Ohio. I have a wife and a daughter that's 22, just graduated Miami of Ohio, and it's pretty fresh for us. It's a pretty fresh wound, and we are just trying to, as a family, just keep moving. And I don't use the term moving forward, just keep moving, because every single day is a challenge. And I think the hard part for us as a family is we didn't recognize how exhausted we would be. What this trauma does to you is it makes you tired at times you don't expect. And that's something that you couldn't plan on, and it's nothing that I even heard people going through. So for us, it's still very fresh, and that's where we are now.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
I'm Gina Merrick. My son Jacob died February 13th, 2016. He died by suicide. He was a wonderful boy. He was always happy, played sports, Boy Scout. We didn't know that he was struggling. We didn't see any signs. We don't know why. So to this day, we'll live with not knowing, but I have found him in spirit and really leaned into my faith to be able to find my way forward. But, you know, at the beginning, it really was, our world was shattered. Our hearts were shattered. But having a younger son who was 12 at the time, I knew I needed to be present for him, and I knew I needed to live life to its fullest, as Jacob would have wanted me to. And through the grace of God, I found my way forward and really get up each day and choose to be happy. And it's clearly a choice, because the pain will never leave me.
Okay.
My name is Skip Phelps. My wife and I were blessed with 2 beautiful girls. And in May of '07, our 15-year-old on her 15th birthday went to school and did not make it home. Was killed in a tragic car accident. So we had 1 daughter to raise. That was 13 at the time. They were just 1 year apart. And I think the hardest thing for us as parents was trying to help her and when we were so grief-stricken. That was a big struggle. And today, we often wonder how she's doing because she is quiet about it. But we have found over the years that there's been things that have brought that raw grief back, and I'll give you an example, and that would be my youngest daughter's wedding. because I couldn't imagine that day without my oldest daughter. So I had to prepare. I talked to Sheila some, and there was a lot of preparation for me so I didn't ruin that day. Things like that. But I would also say that having a grandchild has brought some healing as well. So never imagined how much that would help. So.
What were some of the feelings and emotions that you had as you first began your journey in grief? And Mark, you were right at the beginning of that journey. You know, that's being fresh and raw, I'm sure.
Well, it was so out of order, and most people's lives are orderly in terms of when somebody passes away, it's your grandparents, your parents, and what hit us was, it was just out of order. And that took our family from a family that was just a typical normal family. We have a dog, we have problems like everybody else has, and it slammed us in a tragedy. And none of us was prepared for that. I did not know what shock was. I've never been in shock before. But I do realize now, as I look back from my daughter passed away, that we were in shock. And there were days, still days now, to where the most difficult thing to do is to get out of bed. And as we've discussed in our groups, I use the phrase, you got to keep moving. Not moving forward, but you got to keep moving. And as a family together, we just keep moving every day. And we try to say yes to things. We don't hide from things. We try to live the life that my daughter Lizzie would want us to live. And we're trying to do that every day. It's not easy, but that's what we're doing. And that's what's getting us day by day stronger and stronger.
We learned, it took a couple of years for us to learn this, but since it was her birthday, we had plans to go to a certain restaurant that night. And we avoided it. We had friends of ours that invited us to meet them for dinner one Saturday night. This was probably 2 years in, and we talked about this restaurant a lot in that 2 years. And I hung up the phone and we talked about it, and we realized the best way to do it would be with friends that knew her, that cared about her, and to face it. It was a barrier for us, and we went. We had an emotional time, but we broke down that barrier. And so I would encourage any parent not to avoid things. You say face things, say yes. There are things that are still hard to face, but that was one big thing that, and our friends they weren't even thinking when they asked us, and we told them that night. That was where we were supposed to go. And so having them with us really made a difference.
Well, the same thing, Jacob passed away in February, and we had plans at the end of March to go to spring training out in Arizona, and we kept those plans, and it was hard. So, you know, his love of baseball, meeting the players, getting the autographs was his thing. But we went, and we took away the little things that, you know, we felt he was with us. And so we try to find ways that we can feel him and really say he would have enjoyed this, and he's here with us. It's a different way to live, for sure, but at the same time, it helped us, and it continues to help us to do the things that he would have enjoyed, and just pause and say, you know, he's with us, and smile. Try to smile and say, you know, just take in the moment. But we had to go, because if we didn't, for that same reason, we would have said, you know, my younger son would not have benefited from that trip. And it was important to continue, you said, to continue to move forward, continue to do that, those things that you would have done, and continue to live life some way, somehow, with the memory of your child with you.
And that takes a certain amount of courage to go to the restaurant or go to the training. But I think afterwards you feel like you've broken a barrier, as you said, Skip. But also, don't you think it gives you a marker in life, or a place where you have traveled to on your journey? again, where you never thought you'd be. But I think that it takes great courage to do that.
Right, it's truly a journey. There is no beginning or end. It's a lifelong
Right.
journey. And taking every, holiday, every anniversary, every birthday, every
Mhm.
year in a different way, or
Mhm.
learning from it.
Mhm.
The tears were terrible the first year,
Mhm.
every day. But that has subsided. But there's moments, and those moments hit hard when they hit.
Mhm.
But you pause, you take it, you work through it, and then you say, okay, I need to get up and I need to keep
Mhm.
going.
Mhm.
The barriers. What are some of those barriers? What are some of those obstacles? I'm sure getting out of bed for the first day, going back to work. Where were you mentally and physically?
I think one of the hardest parts for me is nighttime. Because my brain just seems to just start spinning at nighttime. And I made a promise to myself and my wife and my daughter that I'm going to be as pure as possible when I go through this. I will not take any pharmaceuticals. I will not drink alcohol. Occasionally I have some wine, but to make sure that I go through this pure, knowing that I'm a damaged person right now and we're hurting. I don't want anything to negatively impact the hurt and the purity that I'm trying to go through as this is happening to me, because I realize that we're in a very tough spot. So that's one of the obstacles, is just recognizing what you're going through and not doing things that are going to hurt you more through this journey. And that's a continued obstacle that we try to overcome, is just keeping pure with your feelings and knowing that it's going to hit you at different times, and recognizing that it's okay to be tired. It's okay if you don't want to talk. Those are the things that we're dealing with now with my family, since everything's still so fresh.
I heard some advice early on that I think is exactly what you're saying. A doctor told me, avoid excess.
Okay.
And I thought, that really makes sense. Drinking, eating, spending, exercise, anything
Yes.
to excess. And of everything I heard through the years, that has really stayed with me. Because it's very simple, but it's true.
I think for me, the stigma that comes with suicide is very real. And myself trying to learn what people were feeling, what they were thinking. The teenage brain is very irrational, impulsive, and trying to understand what a normal teenager is all of that. And how do you recognize signs? But it was really confronting the school and confronting people that it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to understand that kids are struggling, and to ask, to the training that Sheila's done, to ask if, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you contemplating? But the barrier was it's a stigma that is real, and it's always there. And I push through that by encouraging people to talk, and encouraging people to find a way to help kids that are in need, even if you don't know that they're struggling. So I think the barrier of just engaging people in conversation about our grief makes them feel more comfortable, and it helps us talk. And I think that was the biggest help to me, were people just willing to sit and listen. Because most of them, especially the kids in the parents in Jacob's class, it was too close to them. But Andrew's great, and his friends' parents just surrounded me, and they helped me through the darkest days.
I would say there's two big barriers that I recall. One of them we still fight today, and that is her bedroom. Her bedroom is still her bedroom, as close to the way that it could stay all these years. It's been 14 years. And we've talked, there's been a few times during the years that we've emptied the room to clean the carpet, even though nobody goes in there hardly, but you got to keep it clean. And we took pictures of how she had things on her cosmetic table and dresser so that we could make sure that everything got back the way she left it. And she has drawers in her bedroom that we have yet to look through because we promised our kids that unless they gave us a reason, that was their private space. If there was a reason for us to go in there, we would. So that's a big barrier for us. One big barrier that has worked through, and it just took time, was all of my family is 200 miles away. And so they all went home after the funeral and didn't face it every day. They faced it every time we came home. So it was new to them every time. And so we weren't excited about going to see my family. And I remember the first Christmas, I have a sister, and my sister would not even say her name. And I had to pull her to the side. She's still my daughter, and it's okay to say her name. You know, my sister just couldn't bring herself, even 7 months after, to even say her name. She's better now, and now, I mean, she does things in Miranda's memory, but those were the two, I think, biggest things as far as barriers for us.
How were the holidays? You know, I know, Skip, I worked with you during that first Christmas, you know, and how was that journey there?
Well, we ran away, if you recall. One of the things that we loved as a family was to go on a cruise. And I called my mom in November and asked her if she would go with us over Christmas on a cruise. And so we did. We left like on the 22nd, and Christmas was on a cruise ship, and that's the way we all wanted it. And it was okay. It actually took 7 years to put the family Christmas tree up. But I do it every year again. Nobody sees it because it's in the basement, but it's all the ornaments the kids made.
Mm-hmm.
But it took 7 years before I could get to where I could even think about getting those ornaments up, so.
What kind of tree did you put up the first Christmas? Because that stands out to me.
My wife found a Charlie Brown tree, kind of. It's like white twigs with white lights that change colors. But she put meaningful ornaments on it. And so she gets different ornaments. She has gotten different ornaments over the years. Not necessarily meaningful just Miranda, but meaningful altogether. And the one thing that we did for several years is to include Miranda on Christmas. We had a huge plastic ornament and notes in the shape of M for Miranda, and the family could write her a note. And we told everybody, you write her a note, you put it in there, nobody's ever going to read it. And so every year for 6 or 7 years, we have an ornament with those notes in it, and we'll never read them. They sit in a room, and that's where they'll stay. So.
Yeah, I think the holidays, you know, I found a way that I would start the day just quiet myself, just finding a place that I can just reflect on the day, pray, and just kind of get myself together, because I knew the day would be difficult with family. We didn't put up a tree. You know, every year the tree is getting a little bit more ornaments on them. And it just took that journey, that time. We put up a tree and we had one ornament, and that was progress. And I was okay with that. And every year a little bit more. And this past Christmas, we had the whole house decorated. And I think it's Easter, I do something similar. I have his Easter basket, and I fill it with his favorite, jelly beans, and I put tape on it. And they're going to be really bad in 20 years, but it's just they're for him. Yeah. And it's that memory of, I know he loves these, and every year he'll have an egg, and it's just a way to remember and to do something. I love to honor the day, because holidays are tough. People, as the years go on, people don't remember, or they don't speak his name.
Right.
And more than anything, I just wish they would say his name and talk about him and share. And I think it's just life has gone on, and my life has evolved as well, but I really just would wish they would say his name.
And you have to, I think you have to find new traditions. And one example of that would be, on Christmas morning, my mother-in-law would be at the house when we woke up, so she could be there when the kids woke up, every year. Unfortunately, we lost her 6 weeks after we lost Miranda. So that first Christmas was a double whammy. But the second Christmas, we had friends at church that invited us to breakfast. And they said they wanted to help us develop a new tradition. And so we did that every year until our daughter had a home. And then she has us and her in-laws for Christmas morning breakfast. So new traditions are good.
I know years ago, Sheila and I were together where we met a woman whose son had died suddenly, and she said, we said, what about the holidays? And she said, well, you can do anything for 24 hours. And we thought that was a good way of expressing what's involved, because I think the anticipation before the holiday, the birthday, the Christmas, whatever, and then the fear almost inside, or the anxiety, brings about a lot of emotions that really, through the years, I think you learn to manage better, but that even when it's hard, you're thinking, but it's only going to be 24 hours, I can do this. And I think that was very helpful when she told us that.
It was profound. And then we broke it down by, you sleep 8 hours, you
Right.
get up, you
Right.
shower, you might have breakfast, so by that time, you might have half the day done. Of course,
Take
that's
a
if you
walk.
sleep as late as I do, but no, I don't sleep that late. But, you really do, and then you can break it down. And I think too, did you allow yourselves a way out when you were invited to family gatherings? Did you know you're gonna try to do your best, but if you need to leave, to let them know ahead of time? Or, was there things that you allowed yourself to have a way out?
I tried, either drove separate or just found a way that, when it was time, I just needed to I needed to go. And I think and the family, understands, especially if you share ahead of time, this is gonna be a tough day for me, I'm gonna do my best. And, the tears will come in the middle of the dinner or the middle of, a party. And you just gotta let them come, but, it's, there's really a way you just have to go through it. And if you can escape it, but you escape it in a way of saying, okay, I just need a little bit of air, I need some space. You just don't run away and say, I won't go to a party or I won't do something. Because then you really won't experience that part of the journey to be able to find how will you deal with that type of situation.
Yeah, for example, as it being so fresh again, I don't know if the word's anxiety, but I know Mother's Day is around the corner, and it will be my wife's first Mother's Day. So with anticipation of that, that's pretty rough. And you almost don't even want to have a holiday. It's nice when you don't have anything going on, so it's almost like it gives you more time to kind of heal a little bit inside, because it's just around the corner, and I know just how it's going to impact the family, because most traditions, holidays, they're family orientated. That's what they're all about. So when that aspect of your family, your seed, the love of your life, isn't part of that anymore, that throws everything off. And you just have to kind of manage that, like you were saying. You can handle it for 24 hours, but in my case, like Christmas, it was like I was watching the clock. It was tick-tock, because it's all an individual grieving experience. And it's one tough thing that's very realistic and difficult to manage, especially when it's still, as you all can attest to, when it's really fresh. And that's the hard part, is anticipating what's coming next, and then you have the different holidays and the birthdays, and that's tough. That's the hard part about all this.
I would say, too, don't be ashamed of what helps you. And what I mean by that, a dear friend that Sheila and I shared lost her son in 2011. And I remember her saying that after she lost Cody, everywhere she went, if she went over her families for dinner, or if it was a holiday, a purple candle always went with her. And she'd make it, this is representing Cody, and if it makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. But this is what helps us, and that's what we're gonna do. And for years, she carried the purple candle around. And I thought that was brilliant, you know, sometimes we wanna hide how we cope.
You bet.
And we shouldn't be ashamed of that, because unless you've been here, you don't understand, but they need to give you some space, per se.
You touched on Mother's Day, Father's Day coming up. For those of you who've gone through that first Mother's Day, Father's Day, how did you get through those days?
I don't know, the first Mother's Day, it was just getting through the day. You know, I spent time at the cemetery, spent time with Andrew, my other son, and just got through the day. And there's a hole in my heart, but it was finding a way to just write. I journaled a lot the first couple of years and just outpoured my emotions through writing. And spending time at the cemetery helped me. It was quiet, it was peaceful. You know, I can just be there, and I felt connected. But the holidays, I think, as the years, they take a different meaning for me. And I think I treasure the relationships more that I have in my life versus the holidays and what the gift giving and all of that takes less meaning now in life. I really cherish the experiences and just being with people and enjoying their time more than anything.
Pat, how was it for you for your first few Mother's Days? And even now?
I learned to have a plan, that to go out for brunch, to go to church, to take a walk. Every holiday doesn't have to be the same. And I think that through the years, I'm much calmer about the holidays.
But in the beginning,
In the beginning, it's I think anticipation is the worst part of it, the days before. The holidays, like Mother's Day, can be a long day, but I think sometimes if you have a plan, you don't have to execute it, but you can say, this is what I'm gonna plan on doing. Yeah, the other thing I think I learned was accepting help from other people. People are aware, like you said, of inviting you for dinner at a restaurant or going to do something, and being open to do that is helpful, even though it isn't what you had done before or what you necessarily enjoyed doing. But I think that also can bring some consolation.
I think also being able to, on the flip side of that, being able to say no when you're not at a place where you want to be around people. We got to we had such a sense of community for what seemed like a year, because of course there was legal things that happened, but I can remember Mallory's first day of high school. We took her to school, we picked her up at 10 o'clock and went to the courthouse, took her back to school, and then went to the first home soccer game that she played in and that her sister would have been playing. She played the year before, so, but we got to a place, there was times where we just didn't want to see anybody. And that was hard for us because we were people. We loved being around people. And our church family and the community was so supportive, but being able to say, not today. And that's hard because they're wanting to help you.
Right.
And the way they can help you that day is to listen and not do something, so.
Well, setting healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
and knowing what you can do and what you cannot do, and not feeling like, okay, I'm a failure or I'm weak. It's knowing you. I think you have to listen to your inner voice on things to be able to create that balance. you know?
Well, Pat, you mentioned a few times anticipation, and I think that's one thing that I've experienced and I think is normal, is the day is coming, and it's really all of those emotions are building, and I find that those are the hardest days. And then when I get to the day, it's like, okay, that day is okay. But it's knowing that that's normal, knowing that those emotions are, I mean, there is some anxiety, there is some strain and stress of that day, whatever day it is, a holiday or the anniversary. But it's knowing it's normal, that the feelings that are within you, the tears that are coming at all different times, it's normal, and let them come, and don't be embarrassed by it. You're grieving, understand the grief, understand its journey and a process, but don't be embarrassed by it. I would be sitting in church or sitting in places and tears are just flowing, and, you know, I can't help it. It is, and it is what it is. But I'm okay. I'm standing tall, and I'm there, and I'm present for my other son or whatever the situation is, but it's normal to feel those feelings, and that is one way to work through the grief, is to let those feelings come.
I can remember the first time we met a couple that we didn't know, and it was like 4 months after, and I had qualified for an incentive trip, and it was like a cruise to Alaska, and we didn't know if we should go. And so we talked to Mallory about it, and she says, I have no desire to go to Alaska. If you all want to do this, I will be okay. Well, the first night on that cruise, we sat down, and the couple that sat down and had dinner, they asked us, so how many kids do y'all have? And it was the first time we faced that. And we said, we have a daughter. She's 13. And I boiled inside because I had 2. And so about 30 minutes later, I said, can we go back to the first question you asked? I need to just clear the air. And I said, I don't say this to make you uncomfortable, but it's our reality. And so I learned that day, if it makes them uncomfortable, too bad. But I had 2 daughters, and unfortunately one of them is no longer with us. But I had 2 daughters, so.
That's a sensitive and difficult, early on in a work function. Few of the people knew, and, somebody didn't, they asked, and I had answered it saying, just the way, my son is, starting high school next year. I made it situational versus answering the question directly. And I found myself over time kind of determining who the audience is and how I can answer that question. Because if it's a work-related, I can, really not answer it and just say, my son's a senior in high school. But others, I don't know if I've ever really learned, even 5 years in, how to fully answer that question of how many kids do you have?
It's natural for us to steer away from making somebody uncomfortable. But I've learned over 14 years, it's our reality, whether it makes somebody uncomfortable or not. And I will say, I don't tell you this to make you uncomfortable, but it's reality.
What do you share?
Kind of like what everybody was talking about. To me, it's the first of things. It's the having to cancel my daughter's cell phone. It's the first. It's when I went to the dentist and I walked in there knowing I'm going to get my teeth cleaned, and the person cleaning my teeth has the pictures of their family up, and I'm like, oh no, here comes the conversation. And one thing great about Sheila and Companions on a Journey is they gave me a very important thing to say, which was great, is I could tell she was, because I'm social like you were saying you are, and I knew it was going to come. Oh, how many kids you have? It's what everybody talks about first. It's the intro. It's you're cleaning somebody's teeth, and I go, I have 2 daughters, Catherine and 1 in heaven. And luckily I have those sunglasses on my eyes because it just started to swell, and she apologized, and I go, no need to apologize. Thank you for asking. So I think it's also incumbent upon us to not let that person feel uncomfortable. It's okay to ask that. I'm okay with answering that question. Thanks for asking. So that's how I try to be try to head it head on, and with honesty and, a lot of love behind it.
How did you answer that?
Well, when you have a big family, you can say 8 children, and rarely has somebody said, well, how old are they?
Yeah.
But once in a while, still,
Mhm.
it'll come up. And I'll say our oldest son is in heaven, he's deceased. But my husband recognized early on that making other people feel comfortable was going to be part of the grief journey, which, again, we had no clue about, but trying to get people to be around us or understand that this was difficult, but we were choosing every day to get up
Mhm.
and go forward in the way we could.
Mhm.
And we did that for other children.
Mhm.
And I think it, through the years, you want to give your surviving children the life you gave your child who died. And that really propels you to go forward and do things that you wouldn't always, that you would prefer not to do
Mhm.
for a long, long time.
Mhm. So that leads into a question that I have about raising your children that you still have, or if they're your adult children. You know, how do you create the balance, and how did you, when you're in the depths of your grief, how were you able to help them, or what did you see? And Pat, I think,
I think we were very determined not to let Dan's death define their lives. So we were very, very committed to providing the life that he had in sports, in school, in our church. And so we tried to keep each other's spirits up. Sometimes I would say to Sheila, you learn to be a very good actress or actor. I think you fake it sometimes to get through whatever that event is going to be.
Mhm.
But we had, our boys played football, and Bruce used to go up to watch the practice. And he said the first practice he went to, he realized that the parents were all standing in a line, and nobody was talking to him.
Mhm.
And he said, that's when I realized I was going to have to make people comfortable. I was going to have to go to them. I was going to have to be myself. And I think that through that example, I think that helped our other children.
Mhm.
And all of our children have children now, and I think that Dan's life has continued in our life. His spirit is with us. But I think we've tried to make them feel, we've been very honest.
I'll give an example. Yesterday, I called my daughter because during this grieving process in our group, I've heard from people whose parents have lost children and they shut down. And I don't want to be, and you always hear stories about, guys are all locked in, they don't want to talk, and I do not want to be that guy, and will not, refuse to. So I called my daughter yesterday. I was coming back on a business trip, and I said, Catherine, can I talk to you for a second? And she goes, yeah. I go, I don't want to be the kind of guy that doesn't talk, and I just want you to know that. I know what we're going through, and I love you, and if anything ever you want to talk about, please make me your first phone call. I'm reaching out to you to let you know I don't want to be that guy that shuts down and doesn't talk to you. And I just told her that I loved her, and I want to make sure that we have an open and honest relationship. And I think it's incumbent upon each one of us, and anybody that goes through this journey, is just to make sure that you're open and you're honest with your feelings and include everybody in your feelings, and try not to shut down. And if you do shut down, it's typically by yourself, and you recognize it, and then you can kind of come out of it, but just to include other people. And that's what I try to do.
I like that. I like
Well, my son was 12, and so I had to make sure that, again, I've said it before, to be present for him. But what I would do is I would take him to school, and then I took some time off of work after it happened, and I would go home and I'd have my time.
Mm.
And then 2:30 would come, and I'd go pick him up, and we would finish our day. But, he saw me at times, and I would say I'm having a moment. But I didn't want him to have to carry my grief or feel like my grief was being put on him. And then, so I tried to keep, his father and me had 2 different journeys. And so he was put in a position with his father to to really see the raw grief. And with me, I wanted him to know I was with him and we would enjoy these years. And the greatest thing was like probably 3 years ago, we were at dinner and I said, you know, I hope I've taught you something as you're growing up about finances or business. And he stopped me and he said, I think, you know, you've taught me how to go through the worst thing that's possible in life and be able to continue to live forward.
That's
And of course,
amazing.
then I
Wow.
proceeded to cry heavily.
Yeah.
But it was that realization
Yeah.
that I've helped him understand that life can continue despite all that has happened. And it just gave me chills at the time because I feel like that is how life needs to be lived. And to this day, I try to talk and be open with him, but I said, my emotions are not yours to carry. This is you have a life to live, a full life. And I want that to be yours, however you want to live it and move it forward. But we've bonded a lot in those last 5 years, and as I let him go off to college, you know, my child will not be in my general sight, and that's again going to be another milestone of trusting all we've been through, that he can now manage life going forward for himself. I'll always be there, but it was a way for him to understand that grief is a process and a journey, but we need to keep living.
We, about 14 months after we lost Miranda, Mallory had told us in the spring of that year that she didn't want to go back to her high school for her sophomore year. And, you know, we're like, she's a teenager, you know, they want something today, want a different thing tomorrow kind of thing. So she came home a month later and she said, have you done anything about school next year? Because I'm not going back. So in July of that year, we interviewed at Cincinnati Christian. And at the end of the interview, she says to the principal, if I get to come to this school, would you not tell them who I am? And we realized that day she had lost her identity. There was such a media storm for so long around this tragic accident that she became Miranda's sister instead of being Mallory. And we learned that day. And it was such a realization for us, but the best thing we've ever done since that accident is move her to a different school, and she had different friends, and she became herself again, which was huge for us.
Along your journey, I'm sure that people have meant well, but have said things to you that you're like, are they kidding me? You know, have you had those, you know, those prompts that people have brought to you? Or are there things too that they've done that have really helped you? Are there things that you wish that they would have asked a different way?
The 3 words, how are you? And I didn't realize until after the accident that those 3 words are shallow. You don't really want to know. And I went to church one Sunday, this was about 2 months in, and our youth pastor, who I was in an office beside for 4 years at the church, and he said, how are you? And I looked at him, and of course he knew my daughter very well, and I grabbed his hand and took him in the prayer room, and I closed the door and I told him. And he was like, wow. And I said, those 3 words are so shallow. You didn't really want to know. And so we learned that people say silly, stupid things, and they don't mean it, and they don't know how it comes across. But those 3 words, how are you, became, yeah, you don't want to know.
Yeah, mine was, I can't imagine, you know, what you're going through or how you are. And yeah, those were my words. They would just stop me and I would be like, well, if you really think about it, you know, you can figure out how it really feels. But, you know, I think the how are you, you just come up with an answer. I'm managing, or you know, I'm getting through it, or it is shallow.
My father-in-law, about 6 to 9 months in, and he and I were very close. He was more like a father figure to me. And one Saturday, we were in our living room, and the coffee table was still filled with memorial things. And he looks at me and he said, "Don't you think it's time to put all this stuff away and move on?" And I looked at him and I said, "Until you've been where we're at,
Wow.
don't tell me when it's time. We will decide when it's time." And there is still today a banner with our daughter and her best friend's picture on the side of our house 14 years later, that our neighbor put up, and my wife cannot bring herself to let me take it down. So,
But yet you're still living your life.
still living our life.
Yeah, and you're, and doing what you need to do in life.
Yep.
Loving and giving and honoring.
Mhm.
Anybody else in that?
I think in that example, it's all in good time, and time is an open-ended.
Mhm.
So taking things down, moving things, I think there isn't a time table for it.
Yeah, I think to me, the stark reality that we all get hit by is people move on. But we're kind of we're kind of stuck a little bit deeper in a tough spot, and everybody else goes on. They're just talking about the vacations and what they're doing and excited about things, and it's like, you want to be happy for them, and you should be happy for them. But at the same time, when they ask certain questions, that gets kind of tough. Or when they bring up things that are completely just, I'm having trouble getting some help. Or when it's something that seems so just simple, that they lay that on you and not think about, wow, do you think that's really a problem in your world? Really?
Mhm.
Really? How about a tragedy? You want to try this for a little while? But some of the people, I have a lot of good friends, and they're like, I don't know what to say. And that's okay with me. Even friends of mine that I know are going through the same things we're going through, it's tough to come up with something to say. That's not easy. It's not an easy way to enter the conversation. So it's just you just talk, and you just, like your normal conversation, I guess.
Is there something that somebody's done for you that has had great meaning to you, that really helped you on your journey?
I think for me, it was, one, just being there, but, somebody gave me some books early on, and those helped me, but I wished the person would have come sooner because they experienced a similar tragedy,
Yeah.
that I wish they would have been there for me early and said, my one friend came from Toledo, she lost her daughter several years before through illness, and she showed up on my doorstep, and I hadn't seen her in 3 years, and she was my lifeline every day. When I needed someone, I can just tell her, and she was like, that's normal, you'll be okay. So through that experience today, when I hear of someone who's lost a child, I take my 4 books that helped me, and I package them up, and I put a letter and say, these helped me, I hope they can help you. Expect nothing in return, even, a call, but some of those people have said to me, you didn't even know who I was, but you were there and you helped me. And that is my way of helping me, is to help others. And, it's just being there, and especially if it's a death through suicide, it's being there and saying, I understand. I'm here to give you hope that you can get through it. One lady said, I don't want the books, but I wanted to see what 1 year looked like. And I said, well, no day is easy, but I'm here to give you hope that you can get through this year.
What a
It's the
beautiful
little
gift.
things that I can
That
do
is-
that help me.
That is a gift.
It truly is.
I remember, I think one of the most meaningful things, we've had a lot of things along the way, but a lady that taught the girls piano and was their Sunday school teacher at some point at church, the night of the accident, wrote a song. It just came to her. And she played it, and she brought us a cassette tape, can you believe it? The day after the accident. And she said, when you have time, you might want to listen to this. It's what God gave me. And the title of it was What Miranda Knew, and it was about her faith, because really, that was so huge, and still is, for our family. And that's what's gotten us through. But a couple of musicians in the church came to us 3 months later and said, we've arranged for a recording studio and we want to record it and create a professional recording. What do you think about that? So we did. We got to go. The lady that wrote the song sang it, and 2 musicians played, and we had 1,000 of those made and used that as outreach to the teenagers. And so 6 months after the accident in November, we had a CD release service at our church, and we saw kids on their knees. And when you see that, it's full circle. It's like, she would be so happy that because of what she had to give up, that it's made a difference for others. So that was very meaningful.
What a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful song. Yeah. What's a message of hope that you would give another bereaved parent, or a tip that you would give a bereaved parent?
I guess with me is, part of why we're doing this, is knowing that what you're going through, you are not alone. I'm going through the exact same thing that you went through, that we all go through, and to know that you're not alone. And I would get involved. I called your group up immediately. I think I was referred to you. And that really helped me out a lot, knowing that I was not alone. And then, and I don't mean it like misery loves company. I don't mean that. I just mean it's comforting to know that, oh my God, there's other people. When you hear their stories, and it's like, it's the same thing I'm feeling. So it's nice to know that if you're going through this, that, you know, you can reach out to anybody, and people like us are always, that's why we're here now, is always willing to talk and be there for people that are going through tough times. That's what I do now. I like, when I see things on television where something's happened to a child, where the child's passed away, we all see this every day on the news. I never used to look at the parents. Now I'm like, oh my God, those parents, oh Lord, I wish I could hug them. I wish I could just help them and help them walk through and just know that they're not alone. So I think just recognizing that it's a tough road and you are in shock and it's a tragedy, recognize that, realize that, and that you are not alone.
I think I would suggest that, you know, as a message of hope, of just reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to share your feelings. Find people that work for you. Some of the support groups we tried, you know, people were still in that place of, you know, years later, and I said, well, I have another son. I can't do that. I can't just be in bed every day. I need to get up. And so I had to find a group of people that worked for me. And it's okay. Everybody's in a different place in their grief, and finding someone, finding a way, finding what helps you move forward. But it is possible. I think the message of hope really is that you find your way, but it is possible to live life again fully despite the pain. And it will transform you into I think, a stronger person, but also a person who really appreciates every day that you have and appreciate the people around you. So it's a journey, as I've said, but I think it's also, there is a way forward.
I would just say that there's a brighter tomorrow, and that's hard to see in the early days. There is hope. And I think I would also want to say that let the emotion and tears come when they want to come, in the most inopportune times, at dinner or when you're out somewhere, or, you know, I found myself having a disagreement with my daughter that July over the fireworks, because we were going to the fireworks. And at the last minute, she went to go with the neighbors. And I was angry because I wanted her to be with me. And that took me to an emotional place that scared me. and made me think, wow, am I kind of going crazy here? But I wasn't. And I mean, people need to understand there is a brighter tomorrow, and you're not going crazy. It's normal for a parent to go through those emotions.
That's well put.
Do you have one, Pat?
I think there's somebody already said this, but you have a choice in grief. And it's hard sometimes, but choosing joy when you get up in the morning is a good way to begin your day.
Well, we always say in our groups, get up every day, put your 2 feet on the floor, take a deep breath in, breathe in God's grace, go brush your teeth, make your bed. Because by making your bed, if your day is so chaotic, at the end of the day when you go to bed, you've gone to bed to something that's been prepared for you. And it really feels good when there's been a chaotic day. And in
Yeah.
grief, when did you say there's chaotic days? Each of you, I know, have done something to be able to carry on or pay it forward, in memory or in honor of your child's life. It could be being kind and generous, but has any of you created any type of things in honor of your child or to make a difference?
We, early on, and it was probably about 4 years before it actually developed, but fortunately 2 years after we lost Miranda, a third girl from the same select soccer team was killed in a car wreck. My daughter and her best friend were killed the same day, and then this third girl. So 3 out of 16 girls didn't graduate high school. And after that, Hamilton County and Colerain Township Police came together and they developed a program called Driving Angels. And since then, we have created a nonprofit that I lead, but it's a small nonprofit. But and the goal of the nonprofit is twofold. When we raise money to contribute to get the safe driving message into the high schools. We have a court diversion program now. Students that get a ticket for a minor traffic offense can actually come through our 4-hour course and get their ticket tore up. Let's teach them rather than slap them on the hand and pay money and go about your business. And before COVID, like last February, we hired a writer that wrote a curriculum for high schools, a 9-month curriculum, to give the high school students a topic that their safe driving committee could use to make posters and different things. So that's kind of how, and it's something that I lead, and I've challenged my daughter to carry it on someday, and I don't know that she will. My wife is not one that likes to be in front of a lot of people, but if I spend thousands of hours in my life speaking to students, and I've made a difference just for one, it's worth every bit of my time.
So the summer of 2016, I approached Andrew and I said, if something's bothering you, who would you talk to? And he said, I don't know. And I said, you need to know. And even if it's about Dad and I, you need to talk. So coming out of that, meeting with other parents and saying, how do we help our kids? Everyone was shocked, and they said, if this could happen to Jacob, it could happen to anyone. And through the course of conversation, we kept coming back to, who do our kids turn to? So I created a worksheet that it's called My Fave 5, and the idea was to have a conversation with the teenager and say, who are the adults in your life that you're comfortable talking to? And that has since evolved into a mobile app that is really just a visual on the phone. It uses the phone's technology, but it's a way to engage a teen in developing healthy coping skills, to learn how to express themselves and talk. And just knowing that there's someone there may stop that impulsive action. So it's a small nonprofit. It's a free app that's available.